Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Tremblay, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at FarmAid. For those of you unfamiliar with our work, FarmAid's mission is to build a vibrant, family farm-centered system of agriculture in America. Since 1985, we've raised more than $70 million to support programs that help farmers thrive, expand the reach of the good food movement, take action to change the dominant system of industrial agriculture, and promote food from family farms. Today's briefing builds off of the People's Hearing, an event held at this year's FarmAid Festival. With the prospect of Farm Bill extension looming, it's clear that we have time and that we should be aiming for a bill that is ambitious, that meets the needs of constituents, and actually serves communities and farmers. We're here today to share with you what our vision of a better Farm Bill looks like. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Rania Masri, who's co-director of Organizing and Policy at the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at this hearing. The original Farm Bill was enacted during the 1930s as part of the New Deal. It was crafted to respond to a crisis of corporate consolidation and influence. Where are we now? 4 multinational corporations control more than 70% of the entire US pork market. 6% of farming operations produce 90% of all the meat, dairy, and poultry. In 1990, small and medium-sized farms accounted for nearly 1/2 of all agricultural production in the United States. Now, merely 30 years later, small and medium-sized farms account for less than 1/4 of all agricultural production in the United States. With the loss of these farms came the loss of communities. The businesses they helped support disappeared, and a community of owners became serfs on their very land. All the while, the quality of the food decreased, the nutritional value decreased, the land, the water, the air got more polluted, and state laws such as the Orwellian-named right to farm laws were changed to protect the agro industries rather than the communities and the farmers. So the question becomes, how can the Farm Bill support farmers? Solutions were presented at the FarmAid People's Hearing for the Farm Bill, and I'd like to briefly summarize those solutions that were presented by the farmers themselves. First, in confronting corporate power in the Farm Bill, what do we need? We need to include mandatory country of origin labeling for beef, and which would be S52 and HR 508. We need to reinstate cool for beef. We need to have common sense transparency. We need stronger packers and stockyard yard rules. We fundamentally and urgently need to stop promoting methane digesters and to stop greenwashing manure biogas and to stop funding them via the Inflation Reduction Act. We, in essence, need a farm bill that stops mega mergers. Decades of lax antitrust enforcement have actually created a food system defined by consolidation. We need that to stop. 2, in responding to the climate science and environmental justice in the Farm Bill, what do we need? The climate crisis is here now. It is no longer something that's coming later. We heard the solutions. The solutions are clear. Diversified farm systems, sustainable agroecology, conservation of existing wetlands, and an end to the hijacking of big ag into programs like the Environmental Quality Incentives Program that pay farmers for climate-friendly practices. Grants from that program include a misguided requirement that 50% of projects fund livestock operations, thus funding dirty factory farm biogas. Third, in responding to the need for racial justice in the Farm Bill, what do we need? When we talk about racial justice, we have to start with recognizing and addressing the historic racial injustice in land ownership in the United States. As reported back in 2019, through a variety of means, legal, coercive, sometimes violent, farmland owned by Black people came into the hands of white people. We're talking about 98% of Black landowners, approximately 1 million Black families, were dispossessed of their farmland. Black farmers in the United States lost roughly $326 billion worth of acreage during the 20th century. There can be no racial justice without addressing this core injustice. So, racial justice in the Farm Bill needs to address this. It needs to prioritize BIPOC for federal farm programs and resources. We need to increase access to programs and increase language accessibility. We need to allow farmers access to nutritional programs, and we need to prioritize investments in communities such as the Agricultural Resilience Act and the Justice for Black Farmers Act. Finally, there is one word that represents family farmers around the world and not just in the United States, and that word is community. Farmers cannot farm on their own. They recognize relationships. There are communities. While on the other hand, agro industries do not recognize communities. They treat the land, the animals, the workers, including the migrant farm workers, and the contract farmers as disposable, as extractive, as commodities, rendering the food poorer in nutrition, the land infested with more pollution, and the workers and farmers as disposable, as invisible. Where do we want Congress to stand? The solutions are present. What is missing is the courage of will from decision makers, the courage to break free from the shackles of the lobbyist and to choose the path of humanity and community and not the path of corporate greed and agro industries. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Patty Lavera.
Hey, everybody. My name is Patty Lavera. I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and I do policy work for a coalition of groups called Campaign for Family Farms and the Environment. And it consists of some national groups and 4 state-based groups from the Midwest. And what we do when we're together as CFFE is really talk about what policies have to change so we can stop propping up a factory farm system. And one of the key attributes in our mind of what a factory farm system is what we just heard about, really extreme levels of consolidation. Another way to think about consolidation is really power. Who has power in this industry? So that is included in literally the shape of it. If you wanted to graph out the food system, we have a lot of farmers, we have a lot of consumers, and the steps in between, it really looks like an hourglass. We have a very skinny pathway between those 2 steps in the supply chain, and it's shrinking all the time in terms of who is running those steps. That gives them a lot of economic power, those dominant players in the middle steps. I think we're all used to thinking about that, what workers get paid if there's not a lot of competition for their labor, what farmers get paid if there's not a lot of competition for the things that they raise. But it also gives them a lot of decision-making power, those dominant players, in terms of literally who can farm, where they farm, how they farm, and how much money flows to everybody involved in this system. So one of the ways that decision-making power shows up in a very consolidated food system like the one that we have is in policy and what the rules of the road for our food system are. And a lot of those rules come from the federal level and they come from the Farm Bill, and our past Farm Bills in recent memory really reflect the wishes of those dominant players. But there are a bunch of things happening right now that are quite hopeful to take that fact on and try to do things a different way. So the USDA has a mandate from the White House under the executive order on promoting competition to do a bunch of things, including writing new rules to enforce an old law called the Packers and Stockyards Act that is supposed to police the conduct of these really dominant meat packers and chicken processors when they interact with the farmers raising those animals. We've had that law for 100 years. We've never fully used it to protect producers in an imbalanced relationship where there's just a lot of leverage on one side. So the USDA is writing rules to finally enforce that law. And in fact, this morning announced that one of them, the first in a series, just hit the final rule stage. So we want all of that. We want more. We want it faster. We want those rules to keep coming out. But we also need Congress not to interfere. The meat industry is very good at shenanigans writ large to try to stop agencies like the USDA from finishing the job on things like writing those rules. So that could show up in a farm bill. It could show up in an appropriations bill. And we need Congress to not interfere with what the USDA is doing to finally enforce the law and protect farmers. And then when it comes to the farm bill itself, one, we do need a farm bill. We are currently expired. The farm bill expired on September 30th, but the way we do the next farm bill really, really matters when it comes to the short-term issue of what is the plan post-expiration. what happens in an extension, or there's a lot to talk about an extension that is appropriate, but how that extension happens, the details matter. One, we don't want any shenanigans in whatever the extension is on things like Packers and Stockyards Act rules or anything else that might be happening. We don't want the extension to monkey with programs that are already running that people are doing. And we also need to remember that there are programs that essentially get left behind depending on how an extension is done. It's a short list, but there are programs that folks use. There's some very specialized conservation programs. There's some specialized research programs that help folks get certified organic. It's a longer list, but they are left behind depending on how an extension happens. So that's something that just needs to be considered. And then when it comes to an extension period, we need Congress to use that time wisely and write a farm bill that looks different than the way the last many of them have looked. We've heard a couple of ideas already. I'll just reinforce the ones that our folks are thinking about. When you think about livestock and consolidated power and these dominant players, there are places in every section of the Farm Bill where we could do it differently to ratchet back that control and try to level the playing field for folks who are raising animals a different way. We could stop giving factory farms money through conservation programs like EQIP. We could address why the USDA guarantees loans for new factory farms. Credit is hugely important to farmers, but we could talk much more clearly about who is deserving of that government backing as a lender and which corporate entities should maybe be paying their own way. We can talk about commodity checkoff programs, which take farmers' money, put it in a pot, and it's supposed to be used to promote their products, but there is a lot of abuse. And there's a bill called the Off Act that would talk about how that checkoff money gets used and why right now it is currently often being used to fight against policies that would help farmers. And then we already heard a really important one, and it's basic, that markets function on clear information. And when it comes to our food, we don't always get that information in the marketplace. So one way to fix that would be restoring mandatory country of origin labeling. For meat, we would like to also see country of origin labeling on dairy products. So that's just an example of the many ways in different sections of the Farm Bill we could really ratchet back all of the goodies that we've been giving to the same old players and start to level the playing field. There are bills for all of those things I just mentioned right now. So probably when a Farm Bill gets extended and there is more time, we need to set the bar higher. And we're happy to work with all the offices that you work for to really think about how we can be more ambitious and do a Farm Bill that looks different. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Next, we're going to hear from Berlene Wobiter. She's with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. Berlene, you're on mute.
Got it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I'm Berlene Wobiter, and I'm speaking today on behalf of my family, and we're small farmers, and as a member of Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. And this happens to be during a time where I'm also attending an anaerobic digester conference put on by 2 universities and the EPA. And I'm here to find out if there's anything in it for middle and small farmers. And basically there is not. So my husband, Pete, and I have been farming corn, soybeans, and raising beef cattle since the 1980 in Tama County, Iowa. And we want and we need the Farm Bill to serve the interests of everyday people like me and my family, and not the interests of big money corporations like Smithfield, JBS, Cargill, and ADM. Since we've started farming, we've seen the pork industry get dominated and taken over by corporations at the expense of our rural communities, our family farmers, our workers, and we've seen what happens to our land. Iowa has the worst water, and to our air. And it took 3 decades to lose 70% of small family farm swine producers, while the number of swine has doubled. We were one of those producers, and we left just as things began to change. Production has moved to large, concentrated, specialized operations under the thumb of corporate contracts, eliminating the independent producers. And over, this is rationalized as being in the name of efficiency and affordable pork for consumers. What is not said by these promoters is that the resulting concurrent environmental impacts are water quality concerns, health impacts to workers and communities, antibiotic overuse, animal welfare concerns, and declining rural communities, labor shortages, and inadequate profits for producers. And what is this cost to us, and who benefits? Well, we don't gain anything. We see the corporate giants who exploit labor, land, and the environment have always been the wealthiest and most politically influential power brokers in the country. And that needs to change, as you're hearing by our previous speakers. And the beef industry, which we are involved in, isn't far behind consolidation that has happened in the pork industry. There is only one thing saving us, and that is the differing needs of production of the beef animal versus pork. But there are 4 conglomerates, 2 of which are foreign owned, who handle 80% of steer and heifer slaughter, shuttering many independent beef packers. Farmers and ranchers who are left have only 1 or 2 buyers, and there is no competition. The Farm Bill must restore competition in livestock markets and serve the interests of everyday people and not the interests of corporations. And again, specifically, the Farm Bill should include mandatory of country origin labeling. I have just heard in the last 2 days how consumers, when they are surveyed, want transparency and they want to know where their food comes from. We lost the ability to see where our food comes from in 2015 when the giant meat packers and the corporate beef industry put the pressure on to stop the country of origin labeling. This mandatory labeling would give consumers accurate and reliable information as to where beef was born, raised, and processed, and it would prevent foreign beef from being imported and, because of some simple processing step, be labeled as product of the USA. Finally, consumers could confidently choose US beef and support American family farmers. We also want the Farm Bill to protect and strengthen the Packers and Stockyard Act, as has been mentioned previously. Finally, and I think this is critical, do not be confused by organizations who claim to represent beef producers, but do not align with the voices of the independent producers out here. I have read and studied what the American Farm Bureau and the National Cattlemen's Association, or NCBA, say about these policies that we are trying to support. And they are against them, and their objections are simply nonsensical. Their interests are obviously elsewhere. We urge you to make this the Farm Bill that advances the interests of everyday people. And my husband and I offer you an open invitation to visit Iowa, and we will show you firsthand what's going on these issues. I had an opportunity to hear Representative Khanna last year at our Iowa Farmers Union conference, and I also had a chance to hear Senator Booker when he ran for his presidential run in Iowa. And I am certain both men have impressed me, and I'm certain that our words will be heard with receptive ears. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Verlene. Next, we'll hear from Ewan Corral. She's there with us today for the Dakota Ro Action.
Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Ewan Corral, and I am with Dakota Ro Action. And I'm honored to call the homeland of the Oceti, that's the Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota peoples, my home today. Dakota Ro Action began organizing South Dakota farmers and ranchers in 1985, and we are a member group of the Campaign for Family Farmers in the Environment, and we heard from Patty earlier, who helps organize us. I will be brief, as many of my colleagues have gone before me, have passionately laid out some facts for us today. There are many examples of how the current food and farm policies are failing us all. A few include lack of support for biodiversity, refusal to prioritize local and regional food systems that would inherently reduce the climate change footprint of agriculture production, and now this push from all sides to make CO2 a commodity and the blanket check approach to supporting false solutions such as industrial biodigesters for factory farming operations, which we have already heard about. We are organizing and advocating from the ground a farm bill that establishes and promotes and supports policies to create an equitable food and agricultural system free from corporate influence and continued systemic injustice. A farm bill that supports infrastructure that centers community-based food systems over putting more money and power into the hands of the corporate elite and this global approach to food. A farm bill that fosters diversity, and we're talking about all manner of diversity, diverse peoples, communities, cultural diversity, and biodiversity. A farm bill that celebrates differences and uplifts Black and Indigenous and people of color foodways and their contribution to agriculture. We would also like a farm bill that aims to be part of the solution, building pathways of land access for those disenfranchised by historical US policies and of land taking and enslaved labor. A farm bill that protects natural resources and doesn't finance false climate solutions like defining CO2 as a commodity and incentivizing unchecked CAFO development and biodigester buildouts. Powers that be are very excited for these expensive false climate and food production solutions, creating an environment where public resources are being diverted from healthy food and farming systems that harness the natural abilities of people and the planet to help heal from our current climate crisis, which we are now, in the middle of. Farmers, ranchers, and all manner of food producers are our frontline observers of climate change. And while we may not all agree on the narrative or storytelling of climate change, what we know for sure is weather is becoming less and less predictable. 100-year weather events are happening annually, and our current Farm Bill priorities fail to address climate change. We must divest from corn and soy monocultures and industrial factory meat production and use of US taxpayer dollars to grow sustainable regenerative food and pasture-based meat production models instead, both proven to help sequester carbon and mitigate climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ewan. We were supposed to be joined today by Brandon Smith with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it. You can see a link to his original statement, which had the People's Hearing back in September on our YouTube channel, and we'll link to that at the end of this presentation. Instead, next we'll hear from Rosa Sidra with Compañeras Campesinas.
Hi, thanks. I am Rosa Saavedra with Compañeras Campesinas, and we're also a member of Rural Coalition. Thank you for coming together to hear our thoughts, concerns, and hopes around the Farm Bill policy that each one of you will have the power to influence. I hope that you will consider our words in these decisions that you must make. So there's 3 words I want to focus on in speaking to you all today, and that's prioritize, uplift, and invest. They're important words to me. And then I want to share a story about a group of people essential to the success of agriculture who are at best an afterthought in the policies and laws that are supposed to protect them. So prioritize, uplift, and invest in traditional ecological knowledge, secure land tenure and community-based organizations to support diversified, regenerative agriculture at all scales, and resilient local food economies that prioritize feeding local communities. Rebuild infrastructure to support regional farmer-led food systems to feed their communities and support farm workers to enter agriculture as producers and to build our next generation of farmers. I also want to say that, again, prioritize, uplift, and invest in infrastructure that fosters the growth of resilient rural economies. We need to build resilient markets for producers that contribute to our regional food systems, ensure the safety and dignity of farm, food, and forestry system workers, invest in safe and healthy rural communities. Also, prioritize, uplift, and invest in socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers who have been historically marginalized and underserved. Over a span of about 10 years, I've worked on 3 discrimination processes: Pigford II, Hispanic and Women, and now IRA 22007, or DFAP. On one hand, it's encouraging to know that past discrimination is being acknowledged. But on the other hand, it's important to realize that socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers are being discriminated against in the present. Financial assistance to atone for discrimination prior to 2021 will not stop the discrimination that these farmers are facing in 2023. And none of us can afford the cost of this discrimination to our agricultural economy. Now I want to share a story about 5 farm workers in North Carolina. So last week, I attended a vigil to remember 5 farm workers who died as a direct result of their work. The most recent death was Jose Arturo Gonzalez Mendoza, who died on September 5th, 2023 in Nash County, North Carolina. Jose was an H-2A worker. This is important because the H-2A contract is supposed to offer more safeguard for workers, but there's little to no enforcement of those safeguards in the contract. Farmers rely on farm workers, and everyone who eats relies on farm workers. Farm workers are essential workers not only during a pandemic, but every day. If agriculture is to have a stable, healthy, vibrant labor force, the Farm Bill must prioritize, uplift, and invest in farm workers. I've also attached a joint letter from Alianza Nacional de Campesinas and Rural Coalition outlining farm worker priorities in the 2023 Farm Bill. I hope that each one of you will read it. Again, I just want to summarize that we need to prioritize our rural communities where agriculture is the heart of economic opportunities, uplift the rural communities that support agriculture, and invest in an infrastructure that is equitable. That's what we need in the Farm Bill, and what everybody else said too. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Next, we'll hear from Denise Jamerson with Legacy Taste of the Garden. Denise, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Greetings. I am Denise Jamerson, a 5th-generation farmer from Lyle Station, Indiana. Lyle Station is the last remaining African-American settlement in Indiana. The Lyle Station farming community, along with my father, Norman Greer, one of the last remaining African-American farmers who is still farming land that's been in our family since pre-Civil War, are recognized in the Smithsonian's National Museum of African-American History and Culture. Today, I am here to speak to you on racial justice, equitable justice. As I think about this Farm Bill season, a season of everything being centered on diversity, equity, and inclusion, through my lens, I look at what is equality as it relates to equity. And under the thought of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when we think about the opportunity as a people to put into place and create a way to ensure these things can be afforded to the ones who uphold the backbone of this country, our farmers, through the programs and services put forth. Equality is that we're all created equal, right? Equal rights, equal parts. Everyone is treated the exact same way. But when we talk about equity, it means providing what is needed to succeed. When we talk about racial justice and equity, the Black farmer, the BIPOC farmer, the small farmer, equity is the key to restoration, empowerment, and success. To succeed, we need better accessibility. We need to be able to access programs that require a rural farmer to use internet that is not even available in his area, does not give him access to the program, and we won't even talk about being able to navigate through a process of the application, especially one that's 25 to 37 pages and includes uploads. The Enabling Farmers to Benefit from Processing Nutritious Programs Act will cut the red tape and streamline applications for farmers seeking to participate as vendors under several nutritional programs, including SNAP, one of the most efficient tools in reducing hunger and food insecurity. Local farmers and farmers markets are on the front lines of providing fresh, nutritious food, the Senior Market Program and WIC programs. This act will also provide access to appropriate benefit processing equipment for farmers and farmers markets. The Local Farms and Food Act will make it easier for small-scale organizations and producers to access funding from federal programs and invest in their communities and local food systems. Reducing barriers to access grant programs can create a more inclusive and equitable local food system that benefits all. Racial equity in the pursuit for Black farmers, restoration. Restoration of the Black farmer who has been denied services from a program that was not originally designed for us. The program may say they include us, but they were not given to us. We have to look at justice for the Black farmers. Justice gives equity, not equality, because we have been denied, deceived, and left behind for so long that equity and opportunities to level up, given a handicap from the years of denied access, loss of land, services and programs allows the Black farmers and families to not only be restored from these devastating practices from a so-called equality, if you will, lens, but it will give an equitable opportunity to pursue our legacies, homesteads, and generational wealth through agriculture. Equitable will be to protect the remaining 1% of Black farmers and farmland from loss. Not another acre should be taken or allowed to be sold due to unfair situations, lack of services, lack of funding, maybe even a historical status that will protect what was left. We need to keep Black land in Black hands. Protect Remaining Black Farmers Act increases funding for farmland ownership, succession planning, Black farmer development. The Pickford litigation claimants' claims that were filed need equitable justice and restoration, restorative justice all the way around. These legacy farmers and families have been in this fight for equitable justice for over 20 years. As I watch my father lose land, fight to keep his farm, the stress, his resilience to continue farming despite the devastation and humiliation, to know farmers and families in my community and across the country that have endured this deserve this act to be restored and to stop the bleeding and loss of Black farms. Allow aspiring young Black farmers the opportunity to continue legacies, to heal and work the land with new regenerative programs and practices. Level the field and allow equitable subsidized loans and land grants to existing and aspiring Black farmers. Don't let other foreign countries take land that rightfully belongs to our country and our farmers. Allow Black farmers to return to the land in this coming decade. Empower organizations like the LIFE Project and other 2501 grant participants working these farms to administer funds to farmers they have identified need these resources, increase funding for technical assistance to all farmers who have been harmed by discrimination, which could also look like small ag versus big ag. Don't divide us through policies, but unite us to feed this country, to provide opportunities to succeed and thrive with equitable reforms and restoration to a broken culture and agricultural food system. Remember, equitable restorative justice in the lives of our country's backbone, our American hometown farmers. Equitable justice in the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of our happiness, which is farming. We all have legacies that impact lives and the futures. What is your legacy is a question that we have to begin to ask ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. Finally, we'll conclude with Tim Gibbons of the Missouri Rural Crisis Center.
Yes, thank you, Denise. I also want to thank Representative Khanna and Senator Booker for making this possible, and Farm Aid for this great opportunity, and all the panelists that spoke before me and the people attending. After this, we'll be here. Just let us know what you need, because I know we can help. Hello, my name is Tim Gibbons. I'm with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center, a statewide farm and rural membership organization. We represent thousands of family farmers across the state of Missouri. We started in 1985, the same year that Farm Aid started, out of the same movement, out of the same challenge. Farmers organizing to stay on the farm during an extremely challenging time, the 80s farm crisis. In 1993, MRCC started Patchwork Family Farms. It's a program of ours and a project to keep independent family farm hog producers on the farm, raising hogs the traditional way and getting paid a fair price. We started Patchwork in the early 90s because we and our hog producing members saw the writing on the wall, that the hog market was being taken from them, industrialized and corporatized at the expense of farmers and consumers, our rural communities, our water and air, and everything else we value. As a result, since the mid-1980s, nearly 90% of Missouri hog producers have been put out of business, and over 80% of U.S. hog farmers have experienced the same consequence. To say it was a big deal for corporate agribusiness to put hundreds of thousands of family farm hog producers out of business doesn't carry enough weight. It was an absolute catastrophe to farm families, our local economies, our food system, our national security, and I could go on and on at what expense. But what makes it worse is that they did it by controlling our democratic process, controlling our policies, and using billions of our taxpayer dollars to do it. The result, now 4 multinational corporations control over 70% of the U.S. hog pork market, and 50% of the U.S. pork market is controlled by 2 foreign multinational corporations, Chinese-owned Smithfield and Brazilian-owned JBS. That's why we're here today, and that's why we've continued to fight for independent family farms, our rural communities, workers' rights, farmers of color, and a fair, democratically controlled food system. And we're demanding right now the same things we demanded in the 80s and 90s for hog producers. We're demanding the same thing for independent cattle producers, and to save their livelihoods and the future of independent cattle production. Now, we're an organization that works in rural Missouri. We bring diverse people into the same room. And let me tell you, when we bring people in the same room, everybody is shaking their head yes. Progressives, Democrats, Libertarian, Republicans, everybody knows what this issue is out here, and everybody knows what the cause of it is. For decades, we've been fighting this fight, trying to stop a small number of corporate factory farms from replacing hundreds of thousands of local family farms, fighting for strong local communities, good jobs, local innovation, clean water and air, a sustainable climate, and a truly representative democracy. And no matter what the corporate dominant narrative continually tells us, and I know it continually tells y'all on the Hill, that this didn't happen out of inevitability and did not happen out of efficiency, but instead, as we know, that it came from calculated policy decisions at the state, federal, and international levels, heavily and unfairly influenced by corporate special interests, corporate lobbyists, and campaign contributions. This is not what democracy looks like. Instead, and right now, we need to change course. Now is the time, and speakers before me have talked about this. However, we shouldn't forget about a few recent wins we had that are due to decades of organizing for family farmers and exposing the truth around our food and ag system, where we are, how we got here, the history, and how we get out. For example, President Biden's 2021 executive order on promoting competition in the American economy, that's working to establish some semblance of fairness in the industries that impact all of our lives. That's a big deal. USDA is drafting stronger packers and stockyards rules. We've been demanding this for decades, and still corporate agriculture is coming after it. Most recently, trying to put a rider on the 2024 Ag Appropriations Bill to stop the packers and stockyards rules from moving forward. And another recent win, the DOJ and the Federal Trade Commission recently drafted new rules to address corporate mega mergers and stop the tide towards further monopolization of our food and farm industry. These wins would not have come about without people out here organizing, exposing the truth, and making good policies also good politics. And I want to stress that, because these are both good policies out here and good politics out here. These are just the first steps, and we need much, much more. We've got an opportunity during this Farm Bill process to stop and even reverse the damage with a new vision of a Farm Bill that supports farm families, rural communities, workers, and consumers in our environment. In short, we need a Farm Bill written for and by the people, by farmers, by workers and consumers, not a Farm Bill written for and by multinational corporations, not a status quo Farm Bill like we've had in most recent Farm Bills. We need to include policies that establish competitive markets, ensure a fair price paid to farmers and a fair wage and safe working conditions for workers, an adequate nutrition safety net for everyone that needs assistance, and it needs to address historic racial discrimination in the design of and access to farm programs. We must prioritize independent family farmers and real conservation instead of funneling taxpayer dollars to factory farms through the Environmental Quality Incentives Program and through methane digesters, a false solution. And we need to stop subsidizing corporate factory farms. And we need to create additional rules to stop mergers and even break up the monopolistic meatpacking companies. We know what the policies are. We know how we got here. We know the policies that got us here, and we know the policies to get us out. So all you have to do is ask. That's what we're here for. I really appreciate this opportunity, and please reach out if you ever need anything in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We're really excited now to open this up to some Q&A. If folks can raise their hand, I think we can take you off mute and ask our panelists your questions. Or feel free to type up your question in the Q&A chat. If we don't have any questions, any of our panelists have any concluding remarks we want to share? Anything else we'd like folks to know before ending our time here today? Yeah, Rania.
To all our listeners out there, I do want to make one thing clear. If you're listening and you're angry at where the Farm Bill could possibly go, if you're angry at what the agricultural industries have done to farmers and their communities and the land and the water, one way to get your voice made even more powerful is to join one of the organizations that's present here, to connect with us so we can be amplifying your voice. Another way is to connect with the farmers on the ground who are doing farming the way it should be, and to be supporting their livelihoods as we work to build a real democratic system that actually represents the views and the well-being of the majority of Americans rather than the rich few. So as we work to shift the policies in Congress, let's make sure that we embrace our community of farmers and support them. And let's make sure that we join organizations on the ground that are working for the farmers and the communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And it does look like we have a question. Ellen? There
Yes.
you are.
This is just to anybody who feels like they have an answer. What kind of feedback are you getting from like Senator Booker or others who have got various bills that you're supporting in terms of what they're hearing about what kind of reception they're getting from Farm Bill writers? And also, several of you have made reference to the fact that what progress there has been has taken a number of years. Do you see what kind of time frame do you see for additional progress?
You want me to take a shot, Hannah?
Yeah, Patty.
Okay. Hey, this is Patty from CFFE. I mean, I'm not going to speak for any staff or members of Congress, but I would say lots of the folks, us and people we know who've been going in, because the process has been progressing in a way that is a little unusual in terms of pace. I mean, there's no draft bill yet to look at and say the things you are asking for is impossible. If we look like we're going to have another significant period of time as they work out the details of what the framework is, I mean, we feel like that is an opportunity for constituents all over the place to say, hey, do X, Y, and Z differently. So I haven't heard anybody say, what you're asking for is out, because the process is still in that design phase. I mean, we know there's big politics, there's big questions about money and what gets supported, but a lot of what we're talking about is about making existing programs work more fairly, be accessible to more participants, spread existing money around in a better way. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the stuff that we're asking for, just to use existing programs in a better manner, make refinements, and just evaluate what is in there in light of these big issues like consolidation and historic discrimination and blocking people out of programs. I think there's a lot that can be done, even if even as we know, like, there's a big complex bill and there's a lot of political fighting. And then in terms of the scope of getting things done, the examples I was giving, we've been fighting about country of origin labeling for a while. We've been trying to get enforcement of the Packers and Stockyards Act for a long, long time. And we know that what we have to do is continue to call out that we don't have what we need in these policies, either in the Farm Bill or at the agencies that are implementing it. So once the Farm Bill is written, we have to pay attention to how the agencies use the law. So we know we have our work cut out for us, but I think what is different for some of us that have been doing this for a while is the kind of the reception we are getting when we say this is boiling down to power decision-making, these consolidation impacts. We're hearing more and more folks identify the root problem as that. And I think that is helping us make progress at a different time frame at this point.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Looks like in the chat we have a question directed at Rania. What are two bills in the House and Senate that you believe would be beneficial for us to support? I believe you mentioned them in relation to beef production is the question.
There were several, Senate Bill 52, House Resolution 5081. This is regarding the country of origin labeling for beef. And then there's also the Agriculture Resilience Act and the Justice for Black Farmers Act. And I would also argue that when we think about farmers, we're thinking about communities. So therefore, environmental justice bills themselves are the real ones, not the greenwashing ones. the real ones, would also be in support of farmers. So we need to be doing double duty as really looking at those bills and make sure they're not greenwashed. But the particular bills that I'm talking about, Senate 52, House Resolution 5081, Agriculture Resilience Act, the Justice for Black Farmers Act. I also want to throw this to Tim, because I believe that you might know a few more bills, Tim.
Yeah, and I don't know relative to them being introduced in this Congress, but the ideas like these are important. Elizabeth Warren's anti-merger bill, both agribusiness and just mega mergers in general, was a good piece of legislation. Chuck Grassley's 5014 bill, which said that packers had to buy 50% of the livestock off of the spot market or the cash market, and they couldn't hold that livestock longer than 14 days, which will reestablish a cash market in livestock production. What's happened within hogs is there is no more cash market. It's all based upon speculation and overproduction, which pushes the price down to independent producers. That's one of the things, if not the main thing, that put independent producers out of business. So those are some bills. There are a lot of marker bills right now that address these issues, which it shows that people out here, and I think some people on the Hill are starting to, move forward on the thinking of what we can do about these issues. One thing that I do want to bring up, especially to just Hill staffers, this is my 4th farm bill, and what I've seen over these last 4 farm bills is a strategy by corporate agribusiness, is to attack SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or food stamp program, and say they're going to cut SNAP and then use that as a bargaining chip in order to get corporate ag policies within the farm bill. And it really pisses me off because it's not right. People that need help, people that need food, we should not be using them as a bargaining chip within the farm bill process. Instead, we can have pro-family farmer, pro-consumer, pro-environment farm bill policies, and we can have an adequate safety net for people that need assistance. So it's not either or, it can be and. So I just want to have you all be awares of that, because we see it in the narrative left and right, and it's not a Christian or a just way to go about business. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We'll give just a couple more moments for any more questions folks are typing up or they come to mind. And as we wrap up here today, we just want to make clear that our panelists are excited to serve as resources around these issues. We'll be sending out materials to follow up on this webinar, including contact information of our panelists, information about the organizations that they're with, as well as what was said here today. You can also contact myself or Charlotte, the other co-host, and our programs director at Farm Aid if you are looking to get in touch with any of our panelists today or learn more. All right, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our panelists. And again, thank you to Senator Booker and Rep. Khanna for agreeing to be honorary co-host today. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.